Hello everyone, and welcome back to Mr. Ravenswick Tales. I know many of you listen to these episodes while drifting off to sleep, so before you settle in, tell me in the comments which part of the world you're listening from tonight. If you've been enjoying the stories, please leave a like and subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. Now, make yourself comfortable, clear your mind, and let tonight's story begin. In this new story. Banks are built around the idea that every dollar can be traced. Deposits leave receipts, withdrawals require signatures, and even mistakes create records that remain long after employees retire. But in October 2019, the operations manager of a small Kansas bank found a withdrawal slip inside a locked cash drawer after closing. The request was dated the following morning, carried her authorization signature, and belonged to a customer who had died during a vault fire 37 years earlier. More disturbing still, the exact amount requested had vanished with her father on the night he was accused of robbing the same bank. Rachel Monroe had worked at First County Bank in the town of Bellwether for 16 years. Her father, Thomas, had been a junior teller there in 1982 when an electrical fire filled the basement vault with smoke during a thunderstorm. One customer, Walter Haynes, died inside the building, and $12,400 disappeared from his account. Thomas vanished before investigators could question him, leaving behind his car, wallet, and wedding ring. The bank claimed he had stolen the money and fled, but Rachel's mother spent the rest of her life insisting he had never left the building. Shortly after 7 on October 23, Rachel finished balancing the registers and locked the teller drawers. When she reopened drawer 4 to retrieve her keys, a yellow withdrawal slip was lying on top of the counted cash. It requested exactly $12,400 from Walter Haynes' account and listed a transaction time of 9:17 the next morning. The customer signature matched Haynes' archived records. The manager authorization matched Rachel's handwriting, including a small hook she always added to the final letter of her surname. Across the bottom, someone had typed one instruction: release the original bills and do not close the vault before the account reaches zero. The account should not have existed. Haynes had been declared dead after the 1982 fire, and First County Bank had closed all of his balances during probate. Yet the modern computer now showed an active savings account containing $12,400. Its transaction history consisted of a single deposit made on the 24th of October 1982, one day after Haynes died. The posting teller was Thomas Monroe. Rachel called branch president Martin Wells and Sheriff Laura Keene, who arrived before the cleaning crew left. Both watched the account disappear from the computer the moment Rachel printed the statement, while the paper copy remained warm in her hands. Security footage created another contradiction. No one had approached drawer 4. But at 6:58, the camera briefly showed the bank as it had looked in 1982. Wood paneling replaced the modern counters, customers stood beneath brass lamps, and Thomas Monroe worked behind the same drawer wearing his old gray uniform. Walter Haynes waited across from him holding a canvas money bag. When the image returned to the present, the withdrawal slip was visible where nothing had been seconds earlier. For one frame, Thomas looked directly into the camera and pointed toward the basement vault. Bank examiners tested the slip overnight. The paper came from forms printed in 1982, but the ink contained a security dye introduced in 2017. Fingerprints belonged to Walter, Thomas, and Rachel. The requested bills were even stranger. A serial number list attached to the slip identified $100 and $2,400 notes issued between 1,977 and 1,981. Those numbers match the cash reported missing after the fire. Federal records showed none of the bills had ever entered circulation. According to the ledger, they were still sealed inside Night Deposit Box B, a compartment removed during renovations in 1986. Old construction plans revealed that Box B had been built into the rear wall of the basement vault and connected to an exterior deposit chute. After the fire, contractors covered the entire section with reinforced concrete because workers repeatedly heard knocking from behind it. Rachel found her father's maintenance notes inside a box of unclaimed documents. Thomas had written that Walter arrived after closing on the 23rd of October 1982, carrying cash withdrawn from another bank. He wanted the money deposited before midnight because someone had been following him. When the storm cut power, the night box opened from the inside even though no employee had touched it. Thomas's notes explained that the fire began only after Walter placed the money into Box B. Smoke filled the basement, the vault door locked, and the bank clocks advanced to the following morning. Thomas found Walter unconscious beside the deposit chute and tried to return the cash through the drawer. Each time he pushed the bag out, it reappeared inside the vault with a new receipt dated 1 year later. The final note warned that the transaction could not be canceled because the account had accepted a deposit before the bank officially received it. Until a teller completed the withdrawal, the vault would continue taking someone connected to the unfinished balance. At 8:30 the next morning, First County Bank remained closed while deputies guarded every entrance. Rachel placed 124 replacement notes in drawer 4, hoping to satisfy the request without using the original money. At 9:17, the teller bell rang by itself. The front doors stayed locked, but an elderly man appeared outside the counter as though he had been standing there all morning. His face matched Walter Haynes's death photograph. His clothing was wet from the 1982 storm, and smoke darkened one side of his jacket. He pushed the withdrawal slip beneath the glass, then turned toward the basement without speaking. The replacement notes would not pass beneath the counter. Each bundle returned to Rachel's side no matter how far she pushed it. At the same moment, every customer account in the bank began losing money in increments of $100. Names appeared on the lobby display beside the missing amounts, and the total moved steadily toward $12,400. Martin realized the bank was not asking for equivalent cash. It required the exact bills trapped in 1982, and until they were released, it would collect the balance from living depositors. Contractors opened the concrete wall around night deposit box B. Behind it was not the expected steel compartment, but a narrow corridor extending far beyond the building's foundation. Brass lights flickered along walls stained with smoke, and the floor was covered with deposit bags bearing dates from different decades. Each belonged to someone who had disappeared after entering a bank during a storm. At the far end stood the original 1982 vault, its round door open beneath a clock frozen at 9:17. Rachel entered with Laura while Martin remained outside monitoring the accounts. Inside, Thomas Monroe sat beside the counting table exactly as he appeared in the security footage. He had not aged. Walter's body lay near the deposit chute, and the canvas bag containing the original bills rested between them. Thomas had spent what felt like several hours trying to complete the transaction, unaware that 37 years had passed outside. He showed Rachel a second withdrawal slip carrying her name as the account holder. Its amount was blank, but the date was that same morning. Thomas understood the rule the vault had hidden from him. The teller who released the money would inherit the account, and the unfinished balance would then be measured in years rather than dollars. Rachel refused to sign. Instead, she examined the original deposit ledger and noticed that Walter's transaction had never been verified by a second employee. Under federal procedure used in 1982, an unverified night deposit was not legally part of the customer's balance. The bank had treated it as money owed because Thomas had entered it manually after the fire began. Rachel crossed out the posting, marked the deposit as rejected, and stamped the canvas bag returned to depositor. The vault shook violently as every brass light went dark. Walter's body sat upright, took the bag, and walked toward the corridor while the account total on Laura's tablet began falling to zero. Thomas pushed Rachel and Laura through the doorway before the vault closed. he could not follow because his 1,982 ledger entry had made him the employee responsible for the rejected deposit. As the round door swung shut, he placed his wedding ring in Rachel's hand and pointed to a small return chute beside the frame. The canvas bag disappeared through it, followed by Walter. For 1 second, Rachel saw the bank lobby during the storm of 1,982. Walter walked out carrying his money, while Thomas remained behind the counter as smoke filled the room. When deputies broke through the wall minutes later, the corridor was gone. They found only a steel deposit box sealed inside concrete containing $1,200 bills with the listed serial numbers. Thomas's body was not there. Bank records changed before noon. Walter Haynes was now listed as having withdrawn his money safely on the 24th of October, 1982, and dying at home several years later. Thomas was no longer accused of theft. The official report stated that he disappeared while attempting to rescue employees during the fire. Rachel remembered both histories at once, including childhood visits from an elderly Walter who had never existed in her original life. The bank reopened several weeks later, but Rachel removed night deposit box B and sealed the basement wall. She kept her father's ring and the rejected slip inside a private safe. 1 year later, during another thunderstorm, drawer 4 opened by itself after closing. Inside was a withdrawal request dated the following morning for an account belonging to Martin Wells, who was alive and working across town. The amount was not written in dollars. It listed 37 years, and Rachel's signature already appeared on the authorization line. First County Bank closed permanently before the transaction time, but the building still stands empty on Bellwether's main street. Former employees follow one rule whenever a withdrawal slip appears after the drawers have been balanced. They check whether the account holder is dead and whether the money was deposited during a storm. If both are true, no one enters the basement and no teller signs the form. Because some accounts do not collect interest, they collect the years of the person who tries to close them. In this new story, chimney sweeps expect to find nests, cracked mortar, dead animals, and layers of soot left by fires burned generations earlier. They do not expect warm air inside a house with no furnace or coughing from behind bricks that have not moved in 70 years. But in October 2022, a chimney inspector in western Pennsylvania opened a sealed cleanout beneath an abandoned boarding house. Something inside breathed against his hand. Then a woman began tapping from deep within the flue. The rhythm belonged to his wife, who had vanished in that same building 11 years earlier. Elias Warren had inspected and repaired chimneys for nearly 25 years. His father taught him to recognize dangerous drafts by holding a match near a fireplace and watching which direction the flame bent. Elias's wife, Rachel, worked as a building code investigator until she disappeared from the Wren house in 2011. Her helmet and flashlight were found beside the basement furnace, while her final inspection camera remained suspended inside the main chimney. Police searched the roof, ventilation shafts, walls, and ash pit, but no opening large enough to hold a person was discovered. The Wren house had once been a 4-story boarding house overlooking the Monongahela River. It closed after a deadly winter incident in 1953 and later served as a warehouse before standing empty for decades. A developer planned to convert it into apartments and hired Elias to certify the chimney system. His 24-year-old daughter, Lucy, had joined the architectural team and was preparing drawings in an office across town. Elias accepted the job only because he believed modern imaging equipment might finally reveal what happened to Rachel. County investigator Naomi Reyes accompanied him into the basement shortly after sunset. The original furnace had been removed, but a massive brick chimney still rose through the center of the building. Its iron cleanout door had been sealed with welding plates and concrete. When Elias broke the final layer, warm black air moved outward in a slow pulse, stopped, and then returned into the opening like a person taking a breath. From somewhere above came 2 slow taps, followed by 3 quick ones, the emergency signal Rachel had taught him during their inspections. Elias lowered a camera through the opening. Instead of a narrow vertical flue, the screen revealed a brick corridor extending horizontally into darkness. Soot-covered doors lined both sides, each bearing a room number from the former boarding house. Human handprints appeared across the walls, and several were so fresh that black powder fell from them while the camera passed. At the far edge of the light stood Rachel, unchanged since 2011, wearing her yellow inspection helmet. She raised one finger to her lips before pointing towards something moving behind Elias's camera. The cable suddenly tightened and began pulling itself into the chimney. Elias cut it before the reel reached his hands. When he examined the severed end, he found strands of Rachel's hair wrapped around the wire and warm skin cells beneath the lens housing. Laboratory comparison confirmed her DNA. The camera's final recorded frame showed a second figure standing beside Rachel. Its body had no face, but the name Lucy Warren had been written across its chest in soot. At 9:18 that evening, Lucy called from the architectural office. Black dust was falling from the ceiling, despite the building having no fireplaces. Every ventilation grate had begun exhaling warm air, carrying the smell of burned wool. When Lucy wiped soot from her desk, it returned in the shape of a floor plan showing Wren House Room 24. A dark line moved across the drawing from the chimney toward a small figure labeled New Tenant. Naomi searched municipal archives while Elias studied the original flue plans. Wren House had been designed around an experimental heating system built by engineer Silas Bell. Instead of one straight chimney, 24-room fireplaces connected to a spiral chamber surrounding the central flue. The design allowed heat from one coal furnace to warm every floor before smoke escaped through the roof. Bell's notes warned that all 24 dampers had to remain open whenever the furnace operated. Closing even one could reverse the pressure and pull air from the rooms into the chimney. On the 19th of January, 1953, an ice storm damaged the chimney cap while 31 tenants remained inside. The building owner, Arthur Wren, feared sparks would ignite the roof and ordered the main damper closed. He then instructed the night custodian to lock the room fireplaces so residents could not reopen them. Witnesses outside heard pounding from the windows, followed by the entire building inhaling with enough force to break several panes inward. When firefighters entered minutes later, beds, clothing, and unfinished meals remained, but 19 tenants had disappeared. The official report claimed those tenants had fled before the storm. A private notebook belonging to Elias's father told a different story. He had been a young apprentice sent to inspect the chimney the following morning. While standing near the cleanout, he heard people coughing inside the brickwork and saw fingers pressing outward through hardened soot. Arthur Wren paid him to seal the opening and sign a report stating that the sounds came from expanding metal. Elias's father kept the truth hidden for the rest of his life, eventually teaching his son never to open a chimney that appeared to breathe. Rachel found that notebook in 2011 and entered Wren House without telling Elias. Her recovered inspection files showed that she removed part of the basement seal and discovered the impossible corridor. The moment she opened Room 24's damper, the central chimney drew her inside. Before disappearing, she attempted to reverse the draft, but Elias arrived after receiving a silent alarm and shut the basement cleanout to prevent smoke from entering the building. He had believed he was containing a furnace leak. By closing the final opening, he had completed the same pressure pattern that trapped the tenants in 1953. At 11:40, Lucy stopped answering her telephone. Security cameras at the architectural office showed her standing before an air vent while soot moved around her ankles. The lights dimmed and her reflection entered the vent before her body collapsed. She remained alive but unconscious, and every breath released black dust from her mouth. At Wren House, the chimney exhaled once. A fresh handprint appeared inside the basement cleanout, matching Lucy's fingerprints. Elias entered the flue wearing a breathing mask and a rescue line secured by Naomi. Beyond the cleanout, gravity shifted and allowed him to stand inside the horizontal corridor. Each numbered door opened onto a frozen version of a Wren house bedroom during the final minutes of 1953. Tenants remained beside windows, beds, and locked fireplaces, while smoke hung motionless around them. They could move only when the central chimney inhaled. With each breath, they were pulled closer to the far end of the corridor, where a furnace door glowed red beneath the bricks. Rachel waited outside room 24. To her, fewer than 3 weeks had passed. She explained that the chimney had not filled the building with smoke in 1953. When the dampers closed, Bell's spiral system created a reverse draft powerful enough to pull the final breath from every sealed room. The missing tenants had followed those breaths into the chimney, where the unfinished heating cycle preserved them between inhalation and release. Rachel had spent 11 years keeping room 24 partly open, so the system could not complete another full breath. Now, the renovated buildings connected to salvaged Wren house bricks had given the chimney new rooms, and Lucy had become its 25th tenant. At the end of the corridor stood Arthur Wren beside the glowing furnace. He had not escaped the 1953 incident as records claimed. After ordering the dampers closed, he entered the basement to destroy Bell's plans and was pulled inside with the tenants. He discovered that the corridor allowed one person to leave whenever another living resident was connected through a fireplace built with Wren house brick. For decades, Wren had directed warm drafts into renovated homes, collecting replacements while attempting to reach the final door. Rachel had prevented him from using Elias, so he selected Lucy instead. Elias found the original damper wheel beside the furnace. 24 metal arms extended from it, one for each bedroom. Only 23 moved. Room 24's arm had been cut in 1953, so the owner could use that room as a private coal storage chamber without heating it. The system had never been capable of opening every damper at once, which meant the trapped tenants could never complete the outward draft. Bell's warning had not described a maintenance recommendation. It had described the only condition under which the spiral chimney could release everyone it pulled inside. Naomi located the missing room 24 damper inside a pile of ironwork stored on the roof. Elias guided her through, reconnecting it, while Rachel held the corridor door open. Lucy's body disappeared from the architectural office and appeared inside room 24, suspended beneath a ceiling covered in soot. Wren began turning the furnace wheel in the opposite direction, causing the chimney to inhale faster. Elias restrained him while Naomi attached the final arm. The moment the connection locked into place, all 24 bedroom doors opened simultaneously. The system still required heat to establish an upward draft. Elias ignited a small emergency flare inside the original furnace chamber. Flames moved toward the rooms instead of the roof, proving that Wren had closed the upper chimney cap before the 1953 incident and never reopened it. Naomi climbed to the roof as black smoke poured from windows throughout the building. Beneath layers of slate, she found the iron cap welded shut by Elias's father. The welder's initials were still visible along its edge. Elias admitted over the radio that his family had preserved the crime for 2 generations and that he had unknowingly repeated it when Rachel disappeared. Naomi cut through the weld while Elias opened the main furnace gate. Wren tried to hold the cap closed from inside the corridor, insisting the release would force the missing tenants to breathe 70 years of smoke at once. Rachel realized he was lying. Wren needed the reverse draft because the moment normal air entered the system, the final minutes of 1953 would resume, and the carbon monoxide he escaped would affect him too. The roof cap opened at 3:11 a.m. Cold air entered every room, crossed the spiral chamber, and rose through the main flue. The corridor reversed direction with enough force to tear doors from their hinges. Tenants were pulled out through fireplaces, cleanouts, and vents across the building. Lucy fell into Elias's arms as room 24 collapsed behind her. Rachel reached the basement, opening seconds later. Arthur Wren remained beside the furnace as the smoke from 1953 resumed around him and his body vanished into the red chamber while the bricks sealed over its door. 19 missing tenants, Rachel, Lucy, and 4 people taken through later fireplaces, were found alive inside Wren House before dawn. None had aged during their time in the chimney. Rachel returned 11 years younger than Elias, and Lucy remembered hearing her mother calling through the office vent before being pulled into a room filled with frozen smoke. Arthur Wren's remains were discovered inside the original furnace foundation beside the cut damper arm and Bell's missing plant. The building was dismantled brick by brick. Every piece from the spiral chamber was destroyed rather than reused. 6 months later, Elias received a call from a chimney sweep in another state. The man had opened a fireplace in a house built with reclaimed Pennsylvania brick and heard someone coughing behind solid masonry. A thermal camera showed 3 people walking upward inside the flue, while a 4th empty shape waited near the cleanout door. Chimney sweeps now follow an unofficial rule whenever warm air emerges from a cold fireplace before any fire has been lit. They hold a flame near the opening and watch whether the chimney inhales and exhales like a sleeping person. If tapping, coughing, or fingerprints appear beneath the soot, no damper is closed and no fire is started until the roof cap has been inspected. Because some chimneys do not carry smoke away from a house. They preserve the final breath of every room that was sealed too early, waiting for another living person to open the wrong door and take their place inside the draft. In this news story, the United States Coast Guard receives thousands of distress signals every year. Most come from fishing boats, damaged yachts, or emergency beacons accidentally activated near shore. Satellites identify the signal, calculate its position, and guide rescuers toward the vessel. The system is designed for oceans, lakes, and navigable rivers. But in September 2014, a Coast Guard station in California detected a maritime distress beacon transmitting from the middle of the Nevada desert more than 300 miles from the nearest coastline. The vessel identification belonged to a passenger ship that had vanished in the Pacific Ocean 88 years earlier. Lieutenant Aaron Blake was supervising the overnight communications room at Coast Guard Sector San Francisco when the alert appeared shortly after 1 a.m. The automated system identified the source as the SS Providence, a coastal passenger ship reported missing during a storm in November 1926. All 72 passengers and crew had disappeared with it. No wreckage was recovered, and the ship's final position had been recorded somewhere west of California. Aaron initially assumed the old identification number had been copied onto a modern emergency beacon. Smugglers and unregistered vessels sometimes used false codes to conceal their identity. But the coordinates made no sense. The transmission originated near an isolated dry lake north of Tonopah, Nevada. There were no rivers, reservoirs, or large bodies of water anywhere nearby. Satellite images showed only pale desert, abandoned mining roads, and miles of cracked earth. The signal repeated every 11 minutes. Each transmission lasted exactly 37 seconds and included a faint human voice beneath the digital tone. Audio technicians removed the interference and discovered a man calmly requesting immediate assistance. He reported that the Providence had struck something beneath the water and was taking on passengers faster than the crew could remove them. The final sentence confused everyone who heard it. The speaker warned that the ship was no longer surrounded by ocean. He said there was dry land beyond every window, but something was still moving beneath the hull. Because the signal fell outside normal Coast Guard jurisdiction, Nevada authorities were contacted. Sheriff Elena Ruiz from Nye County agreed to send 2 deputies toward the coordinates. Aaron remained connected by radio while tracking the beacon. At 3:18 a.m., the deputies reached the edge of the dry lake and reported seeing a bright white light several miles ahead. Seconds later, both patrol radios went silent. Their GPS markers stopped moving near the center of the lake bed. A larger search team assembled before sunrise. Aaron traveled from California with communications specialist Megan Shaw because the Coast Guard wanted the beacon recovered and examined. They joined Sheriff Ruiz, 4 deputies, and 2 desert rescue volunteers at the entrance to the dry lake. The missing patrol vehicle was visible through binoculars nearly 3 miles away. It stood with both doors open and its emergency lights flashing. No officers could be seen nearby. The group drove across the cracked earth using 2 4-wheel drive vehicles. Halfway toward the abandoned patrol car, every compass began pointing west instead of north. GPS screens displayed rapidly changing coordinates that placed them alternately in Nevada, the Pacific Ocean, and several hundred feet below sea level. The air smelled strongly of salt, despite the surrounding desert having been dry for thousands of years. Sheriff Ruiz found the missing deputy's footprints beside the patrol vehicle. The tracks led toward an area of the lake bed covered by a thin layer of dark water. The pool had not appeared in satellite images taken that morning. It stretched nearly 200 feet across, but measured less than an inch deep. Small waves moved across its surface, even though the air remained completely still. At the center of the water stood a rusted metal mast rising directly from the earth. Several torn signal flags hung from cables near the top. Aaron recognized the design from photographs of early 20th century passenger ships. Attached to the mast was the emergency beacon, but it was not modern equipment. It resembled an old marine radio transmitter enclosed inside a corroded brass case. A cable ran from its base into a narrow crack in the lake bed. Megan connected a portable receiver to the device. The next transmission came through with extraordinary clarity. The same male voice identified himself as Captain Henry Walsh of the SS Providence. Historical records confirmed Walsh had commanded the missing ship in 1926. He reported that the lower decks were flooding and that several passengers had begun hearing voices beneath the floor. Behind the captain's message were sounds that should have been impossible in the Nevada desert. Waves crashed against metal, ship bells rang, hundreds of feet moved across wooden decks. Then another voice entered the transmission. It belonged to one of the missing deputies. He calmly stated that he had found the vessel and was going aboard. The crack beneath the mast began widening. Dark water rose through it and spread across the dry lake. Within minutes, the shallow pool reached the search vehicles. The water was freezing cold and smelled like the open ocean. Small objects floated to the surface: a wooden life ring, a child's leather shoe, several pieces of luggage, and a newspaper dated the 8th of November, 1926. Ground-penetrating radar was positioned beside the crack. The first scan showed solid rock beneath the lake bed. The second revealed a massive hollow structure nearly 60 feet below. Its shape matched the length and width of the Providence. The vessel appeared upright beneath the desert, as though buried inside the earth, with its bow pointing west toward California. A narrow section of the ground collapsed without warning, exposing a wooden staircase descending into darkness. Brass railings lined both sides, and faded carpet covered the steps. Aaron realized they were not looking at a mine entrance. The staircase belonged inside a passenger ship. Warm electric lights flickered somewhere below, although the Providence had been powered by steam and carried no modern electrical system. Sheriff Ruiz ordered everyone to remain outside until additional equipment arrived. Then a woman's scream echoed from below. One of the rescue volunteers recognized the voice as his sister, who had vanished while hiking near the lake 5 years earlier. Before anyone could stop him, he ran down the staircase. Ruiz and Aaron followed, afraid he would become trapped. Megan stayed near the entrance, maintaining radio contact. The staircase ended inside a narrow corridor lined with polished wooden walls. Cabin numbers were mounted beside every door. The floor moved gently beneath their feet. as though the ship were sailing through heavy water. Through round portholes, Aaron expected to see packed Earth. Instead, he saw a black ocean stretching beyond the glass beneath a moonless sky. The corridor looked freshly maintained. Lamps glowed along the walls, and music played softly from somewhere deeper inside the vessel. Wet footprints covered the carpet, some belonged to bare human feet, others resembled the tracks of large animals with long, narrow toes. Every print led toward the upper decks. None returned. Inside the first cabin, they found suitcases belonging to passengers listed on the Providence Manifest. Clothing remained neatly folded after nearly 9 decades. A silver pocket watch lay on the bed, still ticking. Beneath it was a handwritten passenger list containing far more than 72 names. The original travelers appeared first, followed by hundreds of people who had disappeared across Nevada during the decades after the ship vanished. The names of both missing deputies appeared near the bottom. Beneath them were Aaron Blake, Elena Ruiz, Megan Shaw, and every member of the search team waiting above. Each entry included a cabin assignment. Aaron had been assigned Cabin 19, Sheriff Ruiz had been assigned Cabin 27. The rescue volunteer's voice called from the dining room ahead. When Aaron and Ruiz entered, they found dozens of passengers seated at long tables beneath crystal lights. Some wore formal clothing from the 1920s, others wore modern hiking gear, police uniforms, and desert work clothes from different decades. Everyone sat completely still, facing empty plates. The missing volunteer stood beside a young woman near the center of the room. He claimed she was his sister and insisted she had not aged since her disappearance. The woman looked directly at Aaron and slowly shook her head. Her lips did not move, but a warning appeared in condensation across a nearby window. The passengers were not waiting for rescue. They were waiting for the ship to become full. A dinner bell rang once. Every seated passenger lifted their head at the same moment. Their faces appeared pale and swollen, as though they had spent years beneath deep water. Salt water poured from their mouths and soaked the tablecloths. The volunteer's sister grabbed her brother's arm and pulled him through a side door seconds before the other passengers rose from their chairs. Aaron and Ruiz ran toward the staircase, but the corridor had changed. Cabin doors now displayed different numbers, and the passage seemed far longer than before. Behind them came the sound of chairs scraping across the dining room floor. The entire ship tilted sharply, throwing them against the wall. Water began rushing beneath the cabin doors. Aaron's radio suddenly activated. Megan reported that the ship's mast was sinking into the lake bed and the staircase was beginning to close. She also said figures had appeared across the dry lake. Dozens of people were walking toward the entrance from every direction. Some wore Coast Guard uniforms, others carried luggage or wore orange life jackets covered in seaweed. Sheriff Ruiz discovered a stairwell marked Promenade Deck. They climbed upward and emerged onto the exterior deck of the Providence. The ship was no longer beneath the desert. It moved across a black ocean beneath unfamiliar stars. Waves rose higher than the railing, yet none broke across the deck. Far in the distance stood the lights of a city built directly on the water. Its towers stretched downward beneath the surface rather than upward toward the sky. Captain Henry Walsh stood near the wheelhouse wearing a dark naval coat. His skin looked normal, and he had not aged beyond his appearance in historical photographs. He pointed toward the bow, where a massive shape moved beneath the water. It was longer than the ship and covered in rows of lights resembling windows. Each light contained the silhouette of a person standing inside. The captain's log rested open beside the wheel. Its final entry from 1926 explained that the Providence had encountered another vessel during the storm. The second ship had no name, no crew, and no visible deck. It moved beneath the ocean rather than on its surface. When the Providence struck it, both vessels became trapped somewhere between the sea and the land. Since then, the ship had surfaced wherever people disappeared without leaving a trace. A newer entry had been written only minutes earlier. It stated that the Providence required 4 more passengers before it could leave Nevada. Aaron understood why every search team name appeared on the list. The distress beacon had not been requesting help. It had been bringing the final passengers to the ship. Sheriff Ruiz pulled the ship's emergency lever. A siren echoed across the deck, and every cabin door opened below them. The frozen passengers began climbing the staircases in silence. Captain Walsh did not attempt to stop them. He simply watched the dark shape beneath the water rise closer to the hull. The missing female hiker appeared with her brother near a lifeboat. She explained through hurried gestures that the boats did not return passengers to the ocean. They returned them to the last place where the ship had surfaced. Aaron, Ruiz, and the volunteer climbed inside with her. As the lifeboat dropped, hundreds of passengers gathered along the railing and watched without expression. The boat struck the water, but instead of sinking into the Black Ocean, it fell through the surface. Aaron felt himself dropping through darkness while voices whispered from every direction. He saw brief images of coastlines, deserts, forests, and highways where missing people had last been seen. Then, the lifeboat crashed onto the Nevada lakebed beneath a clear morning sky. Megan pulled them away from the collapsing entrance. The ship's mast sank beneath the earth, and the dark water disappeared into the widening crack. Seconds later, the ground sealed completely. No staircase, beacon, or wreckage remained. The missing deputies were never recovered. The volunteer's sister survived, although medical records confirmed she had not aged during the 5 years she had been missing. The group had spent nearly 3 hours aboard the Providence. According to the search teams outside, they had vanished for only 46 seconds. Aaron's equipment contained no usable recordings. Every audio file consisted of waves and distant bells. However, the captain's passenger list remained inside his jacket. Forensic testing dated the paper to the 1920s, but the final names had been written using ink manufactured in 2014. Government officials sealed the dry lake and explained the operation as a search for unexploded military equipment. Ground radar conducted afterward found no hollow space beneath the surface. Geological surveys confirmed that a ship could not possibly have been buried there. The distress signal never returned to Coast Guard systems. 3 years later, Aaron received a package without a return address. Inside was a water-damaged photograph showing the Providence sailing across the Nevada desert during a sandstorm. Hundreds of passengers stood along the deck. Among them were the 2 missing deputies. Near the wheelhouse, Captain Walsh held a new passenger list toward the camera. Aaron enlarged the photograph and found 4 names written across the top of the page. They belonged to a Coast Guard rescue crew stationed in Louisiana. The following morning, news reports announced that their helicopter had vanished over the Gulf of Mexico after responding to a distress signal from a ship that could not be found. Today, emergency satellites occasionally detect the Providence for less than 1 minute before the signal disappears. Its location changes each time. It has been traced to mountain valleys, frozen forests, and stretches of desert hundreds of miles from water. The message always reports that the ship is taking on new passengers. And beneath the captain's voice, technicians sometimes hear something enormous scraping slowly against the bottom of the hull, carrying the Providence toward the next place where someone is about to disappear.